The couple, both lovers of the outdoors, bought and lived in a 20-acre ranch in San Fernando Valley, California, where they kept a barnyard of animals. Their relationship was widely publicized in the media, but Carole and Clark weren't Hollywood socialites. They weren't glamorous. They wanted a simple life out of Hollywood's bright lights. They nicknamed each other Ma and Pa, and their marriage was described as the ideal marriage. Jean Garceau, secretary to Clark Gable, writes, "For Clark, Carole was fulfillment, a pal and partner in everything. It was a household of gaiety, laughter, corny jokes, and gag gifts. He adored her, thought she was the most exciting, amusing woman in the world." In the same year, Clark would star in the movie that would cement him for posterity as the King of Hollywood. Gone with the Wind was an enormous success and would set many records for Academy Awards and nominations, winning in 8 of the 13 categories it was nominated in. The world premiere of the movie in Atlanta was a huge event.
Gala days in Dixie. Streamlined Wings of the Wind bring Hollywood to Atlanta for a history-making world premiere of the motion picture epic Gone with the Wind. Southern hospitalities at fever pitch as distinguished visitors arrive, headed by producer David Selznick and screen stars Olivia de Havilland and Vivian Lee. Yes, it's the Clark Gables, just in from the coast. Charming Carole Lombard and friend husband get a mighty welcome. After dark, all Atlanta turns out for the big parade that starts 3 exciting days of celebration. They just can't get enough of the Gables, and Clark is his usual modest self.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I am here just as a spectator. I want to see Gone with the Wind the same as you do. And this is Margaret Mitchell's night and the people of Atlanta's night. Allow me, please, to see Gone with the Wind as a spectator. Thank you.
Not on the program. A youthful gatecrasher shakes hands with the one and only Rhett Butler and gets the thrill of a lifetime. Gone with the Wind writes history. A new chapter in film triumphs.
While continuing with a slower work rate, Carole decided to move away from the comedies and return to dramatic roles. In 1939, she appeared in Made for Each Other, which paired her with James Stewart. Reviews for the film were highly positive and praised Carole's dramatic effort.
Jane, you don't walk into Doolittle's office. He sends for you.
Well, this time you're going to walk in. Go right up to him and you say, "Judge Doolittle, there's something I've got to say to you right now."
No, you can't talk to him like that, though.
Have you ever tried?
No, Jane, you don't understand. If I barged in there like that, and
He'd say, "What is it, Mason? Sit down."
He never asked me to sit down in his life.
Well, then stand up, but don't let him interrupt you. Speak your piece.
Carole's next appearance came opposite Cary Grant in the romance In Name Only.
You won't catch anything that way.
Well, I might.
Not any fish.
I'm not trying to catch any fish.
Oh.
Just doing this for the exercise. A test for keeping my temper.
Well, it's lucky you weren't trying to catch any fish.
Oh, yes? Why?
Because, I hate to tell you this, but There haven't been any fish in this stream for 20 years.
Well, why didn't you tell me that in the first place?
I didn't want to stop you. I liked watching it.
2 other movies followed. Vigil in the Night features Carole as a nurse who faces a series of personal difficulties. Carole was a friend of 2 directors, Orson Wells and Alfred Hitchcock. When Hitchcock had settled in the U.S., she had just moved to her ranch in San Fernando Valley, so she rented to him her home in Bel Air. Both directors were competing to have her starring in their upcoming movies. Eventually, she opted to star on Mr. and Mrs. Smith, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, where she directed his cameo appearance.
But those questions you ask each month, about that trip I took to Paris the year I graduated from college. I was only 21.
Well, I forgave you that.
Shoot.
If you had it all to do over again, would you have married me?
Honestly, no.
Orson Welles refused to make his movie without her, so he began work on Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane, arguably considered the greatest movie of all time by critics, was based on the life of William Randolph Hearst, the newspaper tycoon. William Hearst was a friend of the Gables, and William's mother, Phoebe Hearst, was the first Californian to accept the Baha'i faith. In 1898, she brought the first group of Western Baha'is to travel to Ottoman Palestine on pilgrimage. Years later, while visiting America, Abdu'l-Baha accepted Mrs. Hearst's invitation to visit her, and he spent 3 days in her home. After her passing, he gave her the title Mother of the Faithful. Phoebe Hearst strived to help make education available to all. Among her many endeavors were the establishment of many kindergartens across the country, providing homes for teachers, the establishment of a training school for African American kindergarten teachers in Washington, D.C., and creating free libraries in mining cities. She was the first woman appointed to the Board of Regents of the University of California and founded the University of California Museum of Anthropology. December 1940 was a difficult time. The U.S. itself was at peace, but Europe was at war. On the 29th of December, Clark and Carole were invited to the White House. During that visit, they were also invited to be among a selected few to sit in the Oval Office and watch President Franklin D. Roosevelt, less than a month away from beginning an unprecedented third term, deliver what would be remembered as one of the most memorable and important speeches of his presidency.
We must be the great arsenal of democracy. For us, this is an emergency as serious as war itself.
Later on, they thanked President Roosevelt. Dear President Roosevelt, please may we be permitted to intrude upon your crowded moments to express our deep appreciation for the kind hospitality shown to us during our recent visit to Washington. To us, this was a most inspiring and unforgettable experience. Carole's Thanksgiving message that year was published on Movie Mirror magazine. Things I am thankful for being born in the United States, in a country where future is synonymous with hope and not despair. For the unwavering belief that I, in my time, will see greater understanding between the peoples of the world. And in a brief interview after a radio play with James Stewart, she said,
I have enjoyed very much coming back to Lux Radio Theater. For in the past few months, I think you've really taken on a new assignment here. All entertainment is a premium now, and anything that lifts us out of the everyday routine for an hour or so is what we need at a time like this. America must be strong, and we must keep it free by making it stronger still. While we're all working toward that end, to the limit of our strength, we need the emotional outlet that a theater like this provides.
Carole was so serious about setting up a family that she told friends that motherhood constituted grounds for retiring from the screen. I'll work for a few more years, and then I want a family. I'll let Pa be the star, and I'll stay home, darn the socks, and look after the kids. Carole started to think about going into production or into directing, and in those days, there were no women taking these roles in Hollywood. But Carole was a firm believer in the equality of women and men. She often spoke about women being emancipated by masculine domination and about the establishment of a new social order brought about by the independence of women. It was nearly a year before Carole committed to another film. To Be or Not to Be's filming took place in the fall of 1941 and was reportedly one of the happiest experiences of Carole's career. Carole signed a profit-sharing contract, which was a very new thing at that time.
Tell me about yourself.
Well, there isn't much to tell. I just fly a bomber.
Oh, how perfectly thrilling.
I don't know about its being thrilling, but it's quite a bomber. You might not believe it, but I can drop 3 tons of dynamite in 2 minutes.
Really?
Does that interest you?
It certainly does.
Goodbye. I hope you forgive me if I acted a little clumsy, but this is the first time I ever met an actress.
Lieutenant, this is the first time I've ever met a man who could drop 3 tons of dynamite in 2 minutes. Bye.
When the U.S. entered World War II at the end of 1941, the Gables wrote to the U.S. president offering their help and support. Roosevelt replied, "Dear Carole and Clark Gable, it is most encouraging to have the assurance of your desire to be of service in this time of grave crisis. For the present, at least, I think you can both render the very highest service to the nation by continuing your professional activities. In contributing your superb talents to the production of inspirational and patriotic pictures, you will help maintain the spirit and morale of this nation. Very sincerely yours, Franklin D. Roosevelt." Nevertheless, the stars created the Hollywood Victory Committee, an organization founded to provide a means to the stage, screen, television, and radio performers who were not in military service but wanted to contribute to the war effort. Clark Gable was one of the chairmen of the committee. Carole had always opposed war on principle and once threatened to chain Clark Gable to the barn door if he tried to enlist. But when the war erupted, she knew what had to be done to assure long-lasting peace. Carole was the first actress who was asked by the Hollywood Victory Committee to help with the war bond effort. A tour was arranged for Carole, touching Salt Lake City, Chicago, and Indianapolis, her home state. Carole traveled with her mother and Clark Gable's press agent and their best friend, Otto Winkler. Will H. Hayes was present in Indianapolis and writes in his memoirs, "Carole Lombard, with her mother, threw herself joyously into every event of the crowded day. It was clear from the first moment that Miss Lombard, beautiful and talented girl with the vitality of her spirit, equaled only by the obvious sincerity of her every word, had completely won the hearts of the crowd."
Leaving you now, I want you all to join me in raising your hands and making the sign of victory. The V sign popularized by our famous ally across the sea, Winston Churchill. Heads and hands up, America. Let's give a rousing cheer that will be heard in Berlin and Tokyo.
After the flag-raising ceremony, Miss Lombard plunged into the actual selling of bonds. The governor presented Miss Lombard. She was dressed in exquisite taste. Her nature, charm, and beauty created a profound impression. Then after dinner, we went to the Tabernacle for the big mass meeting. The chairman announced that the quota of $500,000 had actually been raised to a grand total of $2,017,513. Her party had initially been scheduled to return to Los Angeles by train, but Carole was anxious to return home more quickly and wanted to fly back. Her mother and Winkler were both afraid of flying and insisted they follow their original travel plans. Carole suggested they flip a coin to decide which way they would travel. They agreed, and Carole won the toss. In the early morning hours of January 16, 1942, Carole, her mother, and Winkler boarded the small aircraft. Clark Gable immediately rushed to the crash site. "I'm going out there," he roared. "You can't stop me. I'm going." He spent the morning struggling towards the peak, while his friends begged him to stay behind as the conditions were very precarious. Gable would not listen. Finally, hours later, they led him down the trail, almost by force, and brought him to a hotel in Las Vegas. He paced the floor for hours. He refused to talk. He could not eat. Then, as if he had reached the end of his emotional rope, he rushed from the hotel and drove back to the forbidding mountain peak. There he refused to wait at the supply camp, but insisted on starting with the next posse going up. It was 2 days after Carole's body and those of the 8 others could be brought down from the mountain. Clark Gable returned by train back to Los Angeles with the bodies of his wife, mother-in-law, and best friend. The Army was in favor of a military funeral because of the nature of her mission. But Carole, in her will, had requested a private function, and Clark respected her wishes. Carole and her mother's funeral were held on January 21st at Forest Lawn Memorial Park Cemetery in Glendale, California. They were interred beside each other. 46 guests were invited to the funeral. They included, amongst others, Mr. and Mrs. Platt, who also served as pallbearers, and Beulah Stores Lewis. Carole's casket was covered with a pall of white gardenias, with orchids added. Clark Gable entered the chapel quietly through a private family entrance. He sat with his father and an MGM official, unseen by the other attendees in the family alcove, inconsolable and unapproachable. Carole's brother Frederick asked Beulah to assist in selecting the memorial readings. The ceremony was very simple, and it included 2 excerpts from Baha'u'llah's writings.
O son of man, O son of man, O son of man, O son of man. Thou art my dominion, and my dominion perisheth not. Wherefore fearest thou thy perishing? Thou art my extinction, thou art my glory, and my glory fadeth not. Thou art my robe, and in my robe shall never be outworn. The realm of glory thou mayest find me in the realm of glory.
Also read as part of the program was a poem that Carole and her mother loved. My life is but a weaving between my Lord and me. I cannot choose the colors, he worketh steadily. Ofttimes he weaves sorrow, and I in foolish pride forget he sees the upper, and I the underside. Not till the loom is silent and the shuttles cease to fly shall God unroll the canvas and explain the reasons why. The dark threads are as needful in the weaver's skillful hand as the threads of gold and silver in the pattern he has planned. He knows, he loves, he cares, nothing this truth can dim. He gives his very best to those who choose to walk with him. Carole's death was mourned throughout the world. Clark received thousands of telegrams expressing their love and adoration of his wife. Shoghi Effendi wrote deepest sympathy, grievous loss, and fervent prayers. President Franklin Roosevelt, who later nominated Carole as the first woman to be killed in the line of duty, wired Clark, "Mrs. Roosevelt and I are deeply distressed. Carole was our friend, our guest in happier days. She brought great joy to all who knew her and to the millions who knew her only as a great artist. She gave unselfishly of her time and her talent to serve her government in peace and in war. She loved her country. She is and always will be a star, one we shall never forget nor cease to be grateful to. Deepest sympathy." United States Secretary of the Treasury Henry Morgenthau, who posthumously awarded Carole the Silver Medal for her effort in selling war bonds, wrote to Gable, "My deepest sympathy goes to you today. Your wife died in the service of her country. Her brilliant work for the Treasury this week in selling defense bonds in Indianapolis will be long remembered and honored by all of us." The Senate halted its schedule of business to hear Senator Willis from Carole's home state of Indiana rise and speak in her honor. And in Congress, Lewis Ludlow read into the congressional record Carole's final speech and remarked, "Carole Lombard loved people. And when the test of love came, she always arose to it magnificently, as she did when she left her home to engage in the arduous task of selling defense securities. She was doing what she always wanted to do, helping others, and that made her happy. In circumstances like these, words are weak and impotent. In a very real sense, she laid down her own life for her friends. And that is the reason why, as she sleeps in death, millions of Americans and the friends of humanity all around the world are thinking of her and are figuratively laying their garlands at her feet to testify their great love for her." Around the world, roads, bridges, and ambulances were named after Carole Lombard. In December 1943, the United States Marine Commission announced that a ship named after Carole Lombard would be launched, and Clark Gable and Fieldsey attended the ceremony. The ship was involved in rescuing hundreds of survivors from sunken ships in the Pacific and returning them to safety.
Poised on the ways for launching a Liberty ship that will carry to the far corners of the earth the name of a great American woman, Carole Lombard, who gave her life for her country. Louis B. Mayer of MGM dedicates the ship with a sincere tribute to Miss Lombard.
We, whose privilege it was to know and to love Carole, stand here today in pride and reverence before this beautiful ship, which symbolizes the high patriotic ideals for which she gave her life.
Launching of the Carole Lombard and of the Fourth War Loan Campaign.
God bless you, Carole Lombard. Good luck.
A good ship, named for a famous American woman. May she carry her name proudly.
In Los Angeles, stillness descended over the movie studios that closed down for the day. Friends and colleagues expressed their shock and sorrow. Robert Taylor said, "It was all too terrible." Marlene Dietrich lamented, "My feeling is one of the deepest and most terrible shock. We grieve, all of us in Hollywood." Errol Flynn said, "Carole Lombard's tragic death means that something of gaiety and beauty have been taken from the world at a time that we need it the most." Ginger Rogers said, "The motion picture industry has lost a valuable star who brought joy to millions, and her associates have lost a wonderful friend." Ann Sheridan said, "Unbelievable and too tragic. One of the greatest troopers, one of the finest souls I have ever worked with." Spencer Tracy said, "So little can be put into words when a tragedy of this kind strikes." Barbara Stanwyck said, "She was so alive, modern, frank, and natural that she stood out like a beacon on a lightship in this odd place called Hollywood." Orson Wells said, "She was very bright, brighter than any director she ever worked with." John Barrymore. "I've never played with an actress so intelligent in my life." Lucille Ball, who Carole had encouraged to take the comedy path, shared about Carole, "There were many things about Carole that were out of this world wonderful. She was class, she was a good actress, but most important, she had a lot of heart. Many actors and actresses shared how Carole had taken them under their wing when they had arrived in Hollywood. Robert Stack talked about the lengths to which Carole went to keep him loose on the set. She was, he said with awe, the only fellow performer ever to do that for him. Gable was devastated and kept asking, "Why, Ma?" A few weeks later, Gable, having lost 20 pounds since the tragedy, joined the United States Army Air Forces. A.E. Hotchner recounts in his book Choice People that summer of 1942 when he and Gable were at the official training school in Florida. Each time we reached the perimeter of our area, we would put down our rifles and take a short break before turning around and retracing our steps. After a couple of hours of this monotony, Gable dropped his rifle and plunked himself down on the sand. "Pa's got to rest his weary dogs." I plopped down on the beach beside him. "That's what she used to call me, Pa, and I called her Ma," he said softly. He started to talk about his wife, Carole Lombard. He said that for the past hour, as we silently tramped the beach, he had been reliving wonderful times with her. He made a funny little sound. I thought he was chortling over the incident, but in the moonlight, I could see his tears. He fished inside his shirt pocket and fished out 2 chains, one that held his dog tag, and the other that held a small locket that he opened. It contained a fragment of jeweled metal. He said it was the only thing that was left of hers that hadn't burnt. The fragment was from a diamond and ruby clip that he had given her. Esther Williams said, "They had an ineffable quality in romance, the ability to have fun together. They were soulmates that thought life was delicious, and they made everyone's life delicious around them." After her death, he was never the same. Elaine Barrymore, wife of John, perhaps said it best. Clark adored her. She was the light in his eyes. With her, it was different. He was in love. To have her taken from him was like someone ripped out his soul. I saw him periodically for years afterwards, and the light in his eyes was gone. Even when he smiled, that light never returned. Frederick C. Othman, journalist and close friend of Carole, wrote in an article published a few days after her death, Carole Lombard had a serious, idealistic side that her public didn't know. Journalist Adela Rogers St. John's recalls her last encounter with Carole. "Do you believe in God?" Carole asked to me that last time, suddenly when we were just sitting in her backyard. Now, I had never thought of Carole as what we would call a religious woman. I had become aware that there was an inner pattern to her growth, that she had had a set of laws by which she ruled and guided herself. But until that moment, I hadn't thought about her philosophy of life exactly as a religion. "Do you get solemn about it?" Carole asked. "I don't seem to get solemn about it, and some people might not understand. That's why I never talk about it. In the end, it's better if people are forced back into being right before they're too far gone. I think your temple is your everyday living. There's got to be something after this life, where you can use all that you've learned here, or nothing makes any sense." Carole was spiritual, not in the common sense, but in the most valuable meaning of it. She embodied in her actions the spirit of her belief. In a letter written to Shoghi Effendi a few months before her death, she shares that she prays each day for the greater understanding of the teachings in view of the condition of the world, which is in a state of sorrow and hate. She notes how fortunate it is to be under the shadow of the faith, and that without the knowledge of Baha'u'llah, the world would be lost and purposeless. She ends by stressing her earnest desire to do her utmost to serve the cause of God. Beulah Storrs Lewis recalls, people who knew Carole Lombard will tell you of her amazing vitality. They cannot imagine her as not living. They say the films do not even show her as she really was, that because of her coloring and vibrant quality, she was more beautiful in real life. On the threshold of what was to be her last journey, Carole had a long walk with me, and she spoke of her desire to see the Baha'i faith spread. In the night when she declared as a Baha'i, her face streaming, she said to me, "I have acted many parts. I have been in many plays, but this is the greatest act of my life. This is why I was born."
Little Mo, as she's been nicknamed, lost no time in getting down to tennis. Watched by her coach, Miss Eleanor Teach Tennant, she was soon putting in some practice at Surbiton.